So I'd like to get us kicked off. It's my pleasure. First and foremost, we want to thank Deuce Space, Elizabeth Brown, and Bree are always here helping us get this up and going. We appreciate the platform to be able to present to you today. It's my pleasure. BC Clark is our Director of Training and Client Development at the Nebraska Enterprise Fund. We're a CDFI serving all of Nebraska and providing revolving loans, training, and one-to-one coaching. And today BC is going to be focusing on how to reopen your business after the disaster and go through some of the key points of what goes into a resumption plan. And we're finding a lot of people are ready to open, but a lot of businesses haven't necessarily thought through all the key points of what does it take to reopen. And in today's times where it's so confusing and there's still a lot of things up in the air, it's really important to plan for a successful reopen. So BC, with that, I'm going to turn it over to you and have a great webinar.
Okay. Thanks, and thanks everybody for joining us today. This pandemic has kind of thrown a lot of people into a flux of, oh, what do I do next? And after talking to several of our clients, I realized that we needed to see what are some of the things that we actually needed to be able to reopen our business. So we already started with the mask here. Right now when we go out, the first thing we have to do is put on our mask and our gloves. But what is business resumption? What is it? Well, basically, it's just looking at what key facts, activities in your business that you need to get restored so that you're able to open back up. And that's what it is. And then why? It's almost like having insurance while you drive your car, right? You have insurance for that car and you don't plan to have an accident. Well, we don't plan to have a pandemic, or we don't plan to have these natural disasters, but they do happen. So just being prepared. So this just kind of talks about some of the things that you would go through to get there. And it talks also about planning for your business resumption, which if you look at it, the business resumption piece of it is really a risk management tool as part of your disaster recovery plan. So in that planning process, the first thing you want to do is analyze those activities that are critical or essential before that business can get up. And then determine out of those activities which ones you need to have set up before your business can get back going. So what are those key business activities that are critical for survival of the business? And then you'll need to establish those resources necessary to maintain those activities and make sure that they are staffed and that there are roles and responsibilities and everyone is checking what they need to have. And you'll go through a checklist of all the things that are critical that you have to do before that business opens up. So we didn't have like a physical disaster, but there's tornadoes and earthquakes and all these things that can actually physically damage your building. In this particular case, we don't have to worry about it because we didn't have one of those. But if we did, some of the things you might want to consider is to look at the physical status of the building and then check around it, making sure that it's stable, that you can get back in it, and do all those key things you need to do to make sure that it's open and ready to be established again. So what's really needed? So we sometimes look at things and we have to ponder. What are some of the things that we need to do? So when I looked at this, I thought, when we analyze what's actually there, what happens with a disaster? Do we have a list of documents that tells us how to restart everything? Is it to a point that we can say, well, before I start up, and it doesn't matter what type of business it is, no matter what business it is, you still have to have a checklist. So this here is a generic kind of steps and a list of things that you might want to think about, no matter what business you have. And what you want to do is just take out those things that are key to your particular business, because each resumption list or checklist is going to be different for different businesses. And so you'll just kind of look and see what makes sense for your business. And then how fast do I need it? So it doesn't matter whether you're a barbershop or you're a dining restaurant, you're a childcare facility. Every one of these lists are going to be different for those particular businesses. And it's important too, because someone said, well, can I just get a list? Well, we won't know if you can just get a list, because what is your business? What are the key functions that you have and have to have in place to open back up? So it is different for each business, not one size that fits all. So let's look at some of the things. One of the things that they talked about, and I thought this was really good, was that have you talked with your insurance company? Now, as we all know, a lot of us looked at our insurance policies and found out that there was no clause for a pandemic. And so if there was any damage to your building, or just the fact that you've lost money without the things that have been put in place, you'd probably be in a lot worse conditions. So, but have you kept in contact? Now that I think we've been down for a month or so. I think February 15th is when the pandemic first kind of got worldwide news. And in March, everything was like shut down. So when I think about that, I'm looking at what are some of those things. I've been talking to restaurants and barbershops and these type people, and they're saying, well, my insurance company don't carry that kind of insurance. And I know we have someone on the line, so I know Diva will have some comments about insurance. So later on, she'll be able to give us some insight on that. But it's really important for you to check your insurance and making sure that all the things that natural disaster, and then making sure if there's no clause for a pandemic, make sure that you get that added going forward. That is something that you really want to look at and think about. And then are you communicating? Are you communicating with your staff? Are you communicating with your stakeholders, your customers, your suppliers? All these individuals have probably been impacted as well. And so before you can reopen, what impact has all of this going to have on your business before you can open? So it's really key that you kind of think about those things and make sure that you're keeping in contact with all the stakeholders and the suppliers and even your lenders, making sure that they're aware of the status that you are right now before you open up, and making sure that you can open when you think you will. So I think that's really key, that we make sure we keep going. And Jim, if you see any questions, you can bottom up whenever you want to. Some of the things it says now, do you need to postpone purchasing supplies before you open up? Because at the time of the pandemic, suppose you had placed many orders and those orders were sitting there, and all of a sudden the pandemic happened. You haven't received those orders, so they're still out there. So do you need to see if you can pay later on those, postpone the payments on those orders if you don't have all the money to take it in right now because you've lost business? Or rather, can you cancel those orders without any liability to you? These are things that we have to think about. And we can't think about it when we get ready to open. We need to be thinking about those things right now. I know we all know that some parts of the city have opened up, and hopefully there's a lot of these things that we're talking about that you've thought about if you've already opened. Were there customers that orders that may have gotten damaged or lost? Have you talked to those customers? So just going through and making sure that you stay on top of all the things that you need to during this time. And then, do you qualify for any financial assistance from the government? Well, we know that the PPP was put out and available the first round, along with the EIDL, which is the Economic Injury Disaster Loan. So those were some things that were available for this disaster that may not have been available in other times. So that was then, and some were eligible for these and some were not. So if you were not, what things do you have to do to get ready? And this is a time I think that we have to think about, do we have all of our financial history in order? Because if we don't have it, what do we need to do to make sure that we can access it? Again, NEF puts on classes for QuickBooks and cash flow management and those type things to kind of help you get educated on your financials. So it's really important to make sure that you're keeping those records. As I recall, for the PPP and probably for EIDL, you needed financial records if you were applying for those things. So keeping those things in order where you can access them in a short time is key to getting open faster. And then, were there any issues with your computers? Do you have to do certain things differently? Some people are working from home now. That never happened, so you have to create a space for that. So there's so many things that you can think about, and this list can grow. In fact, it was very, very long until I had to just shut it down and move it over a little bit. It was like too many things, but it's just, this is not an extended list, but it is a list that you can take and add whatever you need to add to it. Take from it what you can take from it and be able to move from there. I think that that's the most important thing, because as you're talking to other businesses and they're asking you, well, what things do you think I should do? There's so many things that you can do to help each other. And I think at this point in time is the time that you have to be thinking about that. You know, if you don't have to order any inventory. So let's take one scenario. Let's take a restaurant. So you're a restaurant, you've been closed for a month and a half, 6 weeks or what have you, and now you need to open. What are some of those things that you might need in order to get going? Well, first of all, if you plan to get going, and let's just say you're planning on getting started next week, have you looked at all your financials? What financial position is your business in right now? Do you need money to reopen? If you were not able to get any of the PPP or the EIDL, the things that were offered by the government. So what do you need? Do you have your financial records available? And then if you don't, can you reconstruct them from your QuickBooks or other forms, or your accountant and those type things? These are things that become very critical at a time like this. And sometimes we don't think about that until, you know, it's a little too late. So we just want to put it back into the forefront, making sure that you have your financials in order and that you're able to access them. When you go to the bank, you have everything you need, especially if you plan to get open and you hadn't thought about, wow, I didn't want to have to finance this myself. So let's kind of look. So this is kind of just some questions that you can look at and consider as you're going forward. Number one, you know, have you developed any recovery objectives? If you haven't, this is a good time to think about, you know, we've had a disaster. So, you know what things I need to plan for? You know, and I really need to make sure I do some step 1, step 2, step 3. If you are a company with several different departments, each department should have some type of recovery steps. And of course, that all of the departments will come together, it'll be one plan, but you need to start thinking about what things do we need to do? And then have you established a team that can take care of these plans? Every person in each department should have a responsibility, and there should be one leader in that team or in that department that is responsible for the action steps. So you got to make sure that that's happening as well. The other thing I would say is that you want to make sure that the team knows exactly what you're looking for and what they need to do to get that department back going. Because if you have multiple departments and you're going to come back online, everybody needs to come back usually around the same time to keep things in sync. But we just have to look at that and see. And then, do you need additional support from the outside? What resources additional that you may need that are not in-house, and making sure that you're planning for those. And then, are you aware of any requirements before you reopen from the government? Well, as a matter of fact, yes, because if you're a restaurant now, there are some different things that you have to do. There are restrictions now, you know, keeping your tables only, I think you can only go back 50% or 25%, meaning that you can't have as many individuals in your restaurant at the same time. Your workers have to now be masked and have gloves on, and some are requiring those individuals to come in with masks and gloves. I know barbershops that are saying right now, well, we put a smock on them when they come in. They have to have a mask and they have to have gloves. And we're even supplying them with the shield. So a lot of things that we probably never thought about, we have to think about now. So some of those things are really important. And if they're government mandated, you have to follow those if you plan to open. So just making sure that you've checked everything, that you have the adequate resources, the staff, that you know, the business is ready to operate in a normal fashion. And it may not be normal as we know it, but normal for the time. And then making sure that you know whatever that cost is, and that you're able to handle that. And will that be done from inside, internally, or externally? Just things to ponder and think about. Do you have a marketing strategy? You know, a strategy that will help you promote that you're opening your business. And of course, we have many channels, especially on you know, social media. Make sure you're using all of your social media to promote that. Making sure that you're sending out little tweets, you know, every other day, going up to the time. Do some pop-ups before you actually open up, so people can kind of get a sense and a feel for how things are going and how they're looking. Have you incorporated any lessons that that you kind of have learned from being closed, what things you might do differently, what products you may be offering, what services you're going to do differently. So when something like this happens, an interruption, there's always things to ponder and to think about. And then, can I do something different? Do I have to do, do I need to keep this type of inventory? Has the market changed so that maybe they're not looking for the same products or services if it was a long shutdown? So again, thinking about all of those things and analyzing those things beforehand will help you be more successful when you reopen. And I think it's really important because if you don't have any goals, especially financial goals that you want to achieve with this going on, and if you had some before, what do you have to adjust to make sure that you meet those financial goals that you set up for the year of 2020? But because of the pandemic, it maybe has caused you to have to retweak some things. So again, thinking about those things will help you be better prepared when it's time to open. So when you think about if I have to reopen and I need money to do that, so can you afford to reopen with what you have? And will those resources come out of your internal business right now, or will it come from your personal budget? Where would it come from if you need money? Again, keeping those financial records in place will help you be able to make those decisions and be able to have informed decisions in a timely manner that can keep you going and get the business open when you need to. Was there existing debt that maybe you need to look at now and decide how you're going to get that funded? Setting up some type of structure with those debtors and making sure that you set them and let them know. We've all been in a pandemic, so I'm sure that they'll be more than happy to sit down and work out a plan with you to get the debt taken care of. But just thinking about these things, nothing stays the same and everything changes, but we have to sometimes think a little different about how we need to go from here on. And with this checklist, it's just giving you ideas to have you think about before you reopen. Some people have already reopened, and I think it's slow going in some places. In other places, it may not be. So again, it's up to you to, just kind of make sure you're checking out everything and making sure that you're ready to open. When that door opens, make sure that everything is in operations order so that you don't have to miss a step. I think that's really important. So if you need to look at sources of funding, there's different types of funding that's out there. Again, hopefully there's some, if you didn't get in on the last PPP round, there will be one coming up. There is one now, I'm sorry, the second round is available. I've talked to several banks that still say that as long as the money's there, they're still doing that. Core Bank is one of those banks. First National Bank, if you're still trying to get PPP or apply for that. And I believe that Cobalt was one, and also Centris Federal Credit Union. American Bank was also one. So if you're still trying to apply, those are some banks that you might want to look at for funding. And just in general, if you don't have, if you didn't qualify for any of those things, if you're seeking funds, those are some banks that you can definitely check out as well. So I think that the one thing too is that, if you're, look at your existing lines of credit, do you have existing lines of credit? And if you do, how would you use those for, to get the funding going? How would that work for you? And is that something that's available to you? So those are things that you'll need to think about. Jim, were you talking?
Yeah,
Yes.
Leanne Millibar added that there's still $145 billion available through the PPP. So the fund's still there. There's many local banks in Omaha and in Nebraska that are willing to work with you to help get you funded. BC mentioned several of them. So $145 billion, remember the second tranche was $310 billion. So that's just about 50%. So it's still there. We have great banks in Nebraska, so let's make sure we work with those banks.
Absolutely.
Thanks, Leon. We appreciate your input.
Thanks, Leon. Yes, absolutely. And I think the other thing too is I think some people had put in their PPP and they're just waiting. So do you recommend that if they're waiting on PPP from particular banks and they haven't heard anything, should they inquire with a different bank, or should they just kind of wait and see what's going to happen? Because I've had that question come up a couple times.
Yeah, and maybe Leon, if you want to put your response. I've heard some banks say it's better to only apply with one, but if, at this point, if their bank isn't working to get that in, then they might need to check with their banker and see why it hasn't gone in.
Why it hasn't gone in? Yes, I think that's really wise, and we'll wait on that. And then, and then, you know, Jim, to the people that didn't qualify for whatever reason or another, have they considered maybe having to finance before they can open up their businesses too? So they can check with those resources that are out there and available as well for financing for that, for to get their business open as well.
Exactly. And I'm sure there'll be funds coming available for getting started again. I know NEF will be working with the recovery very closely.
Yes. And I think that's really important too, because there's so many, we get a lot of calls about funding. I've had calls today about funding. So again, let's talk about a little bit about some of those, what are those essential activities that are needed to reopen, and then the resources that you also need to support those activities that are there. And then we talked about were there any restrictions. Yes, there are restrictions about, you know, for us to be able to open, and it depends on what type of business it is that, that we can say, well, you know what, I think we need to do this, or we think we need to do that. But the government has kind of put some mandates out there. So we have to make sure we're following those. You know, and have you continue to communicate? Again, we talked about that because communication was key. A lot of people were calling around to find out if businesses were closed because they had not heard from them. Now, when I think about that, you know, if you've been down for 6 weeks and you've had no contact with your customers, I think the one thing that they're wondering too is if you're still open. So if you have not put out communications or said, you know, hey, we're temporarily closed, but we will be opening back up. They're wondering if you're going to open. So make sure that you're communicating. Make sure that the staff is aware of your plans, and making sure that, because if they've been laid off or what have you, they need to also be able to know when to come back. So when you're ready, there has to be a concerted effort between the staff and your vendors and your suppliers. So making sure you're keeping in touch with each and every one of them that are critical for you opening up that business. And you know, some of the other things like, do you have a market plan or market strategy to let them know? So probably about a week to 2 weeks prior to opening, you probably want to start sending out some information on Facebook and on LinkedIn and just all those key places that you know your customers are, so let them know what things that you're planning on doing and when you'll be open, so that they have an idea of about when you think that you might be getting back to business. I think it's really important too to make sure that if there's anyone that was laid off during this process, that you're communicating with them. When you call an employee and to have them come back to work if they're on unemployment, I just want to let people know that if you're called to come back to work and you refuse, or you say, well, I'm going to wait and just continue to get the unemployment, they do have to report that you don't want to come back to work. So it could cause your unemployment to be stopped. So just be aware that they gave you a job in the beginning, and you want to make sure that we're all supporting each other and keeping things intact and on point throughout this whole time. And then there's some other things that you might want to think about too, like are there other businesses that has opened or reopened in your area? And are they the type of businesses that may be causing some, you know, market share to be lost? So many things that you can think about at this time. But then are there other businesses that closed that's in your area, and what impact that might have on your particular business? Because there are so many things that are happening in so many different ways, so many moving parts. You kind of have to look at a little bit of everything. You know, you want to make sure that the market is still like it should be. You know, are there any plans that you can think of that you might need to add to what you're already doing? Are there certain things that you may need to look at and think about? I mean, what things have you decided? Do you have to order the same amount of inventory? if you had to order it? Do you need to reduce the cost, your inventory? You know, a lot of these things are here now, because when you first open, you may not get that onslaught like everyone is thinking, that people are going to rush in. I think it's going to be maybe somewhat delayed in different businesses. So you want to be planning for that as well. I think that doing the pop-ups or the early opens, open up one day and see what the crowd looks like, opening up another day. I think a staged opening is a good thing as well. Whether you're a restaurant, whether you're a barber or a salon or whatever. And some of those individuals have decided that that's what they're doing. I talked with a barbershop, and he has 27 employees. And what he said, that he's staggering his shifts so that there's only so many people in the shop at one time. And he's changed all of the workstations so that they're over 14 feet apart. So he has a large facility, and instead of just 6 feet, he has them 14 feet apart. And they also have shields there. So I think that, you know, when we look at this, this is so different than anything we probably had before, that we have to think about additional things that we didn't think about before. A lot of the restaurants now have shields over the registers to protect their employees. There's no more laying out food on the buffet table. So a lot of things have changed. And I have to tell you, you know, when you think about all of this, a lot of us just didn't know what that was going to cost or how it was going to affect us. But there's so many things that we're looking at right now that before we open up, that we just have to make sure that we're checking all of the things that make sense. You know, do you have equipment that you might need to have restored or change it out? Or is there something different as far as moving things in your restaurant, in your barbershop, in your salon, in your office? If you have individuals sitting right next to each other, how are you going to stage them once you get back to the office? So a lot of this stuff is things that we all have to think about, you know, and in different ways for different businesses. So you take what you think that you need and you look at your area, and then what is my checklist? What's essential? What do I need to do to make sure I have what I need, that these essential areas are supported? And then how do I make sure that I have the right staff and everything in place so that when we do this reopen, that everything will run smoothly. So I think that when we look at a lot of that, you want to make sure that you keep in contact with all of your documents. That's pretty key. I know one facility said that they had somehow misplaced a lot of their permits and things due to the pandemic. So now making sure that you have all of those is going to be key. So making sure that you put those in a great place so that even on the pandemic and things that may have happened during that pandemic, now you need to make sure you get all of those permits and things back up so that you can open up and things are in place. Jim, you have anything that you like to add to that?
No, I think you're spot on. The key is really planning for successful reopening. And I know I had somebody one time tell me that, you know, planning and thinking is work, and I would agree with that. Thinking's hard work, so don't think that this isn't work. It is work, but it will make you successful on the opening and reopening.
Well, I was looking at something that where one of the individuals had said that the planning process was more important than the plan itself. And so when you think about it, a lot of times when you're planning, a lot of things and a lot of input come into place. But I tell you, once you get through that planning, it kind of gives you insight on how to do it again if it happens for that next time around. So when we think about the disaster recovery and what things we need to do, we have to add the pandemic now. And that could be anything from making sure that if you didn't wash your hands before, let's wash our hands. But washing your hands for 20 seconds, how many times you just washed your hands for a couple seconds and dried them? Well, now it's really important that we keep doing the 20 seconds. It's really important that we protect ourselves and making sure that we protect other people. So wearing our gloves, those things are really key. And at this point in time with the city opening up, I think everyone should be cautious. I guess the numbers are still going up. We're still getting positive cases and we're still having, people dying. And so I think right now it's really important that we take all the steps we need to get ready to open and making sure that when we do open, that we can protect our staff, our employees, whoever they are, your customers, and make sure that everybody can be safe. And I think that that's a key part of this whole thing about a checklist. So the checklist really is whatever you need to do for your business to get it up and running, and so that you're operational, so that everybody is safe, and that you can go on and begin to operate that business with some sense of confidence that you're doing all the things right, and that we can keep everybody safe and continue to grow our business. We all want to have successful businesses, but I tell you, when something like this happens, it kind of puts you in a position of, let me make sure I have everything I need, or perhaps let me think about, is it something I need to do different in this business? Do I need to be a little more creative? Do I need to change what things are happening on the other side? So I think that sometimes when we get to certain things, we kind of stop. And I think we just need to make sure that we continue to go forward. I just wanted to kind of go back and see, Jim. So this was a list of things that you could think about. It is a list of things that you can take out and do. We have a complete checklist. So if anyone would like that checklist, we'd be more than happy to share it with you. But to put them all in the PowerPoint was just too much, and it would take us an hour and a half. So, but at this time, any questions that individuals would have, we would love to answer those questions right now, and give anyone an opportunity to share anything that they may have if they started to reopen their business as well.
Yeah, and everybody feel free to type the questions in the Q&A in Zoom. Elizabeth, I'm not sure if you're able to unmute everybody, but if you are, that would be fine. And just to follow on, Leon, thanks for being on the line.
Yes.
Leon's reminder, there's still $145 billion available through the PPP, and he suggests working with your first lender. So make sure you've got everything into your first lender. Don't bounce from bank to bank to bank.
Right.
But work with your first lender. Unfortunately, we can't unmute people.
Okay,
so
that's fine.
So Margie was asking, how do we get the list?
Okay, so actually she can, we will have it available on our website at nebbiz.org, and or you can email, just email to, what's the email we want to use, Jim?
Let's have them go either to you or Leo.
Okay, so just go to LEOM.
And I just put it in the chat box.
Good. The one thing I want to say too is that if you have not applied for your for the PPP and you need help, we would be willing to assist anyone that needs help filing for that PPP. And I don't think that the economic injury disaster loan is available only for agriculture. Is that correct? Okay. So
right at this point, yes, Leon confirmed that earlier, and I'm sure Leon will let all of us know. The SBA local office has been doing a great job letting us all know when changes are happening. So
yeah, they've been doing an excellent job, that's for sure.
We'll share that as soon as we get that with everybody as well.
Yeah, some of the other things while we're just waiting on questions and things is they were wondering if you had considered what accounting system that you were using. Like for one thing, a lot of individuals weren't eligible the first round because if they were a sole proprietor, they didn't have a Schedule C. So just checking and making sure that you have all your financial documents that you'll need to get through. And I think the second round, a lot of individuals have now file their taxes and have their Schedule Cs, so they're able to go forth and apply for the PPP. But again, that was one thing that a lot of individuals were not eligible or didn't have their financials, so right away they were declined on getting the help that they needed. But again,
that's a really important point, BC, is it's really important to keep good records at this point in time. Even if you don't need the EIDL and even if you don't need the PPP, you might be making insurance claims, you might be making a new loan for getting started again, for inventory, for a piece of equipment. You're still going to need all your financial records in the right place. This year too is also important because my guess is there will be a lot of opportunity for deductions for taxes
That's right.
because of losses and so forth. So but you need to keep your records. So
That's
really
right.
keep your records impeccable. Diva just wants to remind everybody that you need to check with your insurance agent to make sure that you don't have just liability insurance, but you want business interruption insurance as well, or business income insurance. And make sure, double check the fine print, make sure that it protects you. It's your right to talk to 2 or 3 insurance agents. So make sure
That's
you
awesome.
talk to them and make sure that the insurance you're buying is what you're going to need. Thanks, Diva. We appreciate that.
Yes. And you might just, yeah, that's excellent. That's excellent. Some of the other things while people are getting questions together is, have you looked at the services and the products? Do you need to reduce any of those? You know, Jim, during this time, a lot of people were saying, well, you know, this product now is not available. And I was talking to an appliance store and all the freezers are gone. So if you were looking for a freezer, they're sold out until July. And that's, I think, all the major stores. So there's so much going on. So I just want to let people know that during this time, there's a lot of things that are happening. And by the time these freezers come back in, hopefully the pandemic is over and people won't need them. But again, you want to look at reducing costs right now too. You don't want to have a lot of expenses right now while this is going on, because we don't know what's going to happen in the next couple of months. So I would say make sure that you're operating at you know, the cost effectively so that you're not overspending at this time as well.
I thought we were just sort of hoarding hand sanitizer and toilet paper, but I guess we're hoarding freezers as well.
Well, I think we're hoarding meat. So the freezers became something that, yeah, they needed to get. So again, you know, I mean, I think that everybody is thinking about what things they can do. So in case this happens again, you know, will I be in the right position to continue to move forward? And I think that's only, you know, that's only right. You have to do what you have to do. I think the other thing too is that they were saying to do periodic assessments of your business, like every 6 months, just stop, take a good look at everything, you know, and making sure that you're assessing what you expect to be happening with each of the departments or areas in your business, making sure that they're running as efficient as they can, so that you don't have these things that happened within a pandemic. Now you found out that this area was really not functioning the way you thought. So, you know, these are just things that you could do, you know, all the time. Just reassess your business, reassess your staff. You know, are they, you know, following all the guidelines that they should be following? Are things safe? Are they in the right place? Are we doing it efficiently? So those things that you can, you know, add to your list to make sure that you do twice a year. Let's check out things. Let's check our insurance and making sure that we're covered for anything that would happen. You know, as Diva stated out, making sure that we understand our financials, that we're taking workshop classes that will help us, like QuickBooks and taxes and insurance, all the things that we need. There's so many free available webinars that want to make sure that people are informed. And that's another way to stay on top of things as well. There's all kinds of workshops through Nebraska Enterprise Fund, through SCORE, through the SBA. So all these resources have workshops that are free that you can go to so that you can stay informed and keep your business on point.
Yep. Are there any other questions? We're happy to take any questions. Just either put it in the Q&A or the chat. And Leo, are you seeing any questions from Facebook Live out there? Okay, no questions from Facebook Live. BC and I will stay on a little bit longer, but we want to thank everybody for joining us today. Just want to remind you, the EEC is doing a session on Wednesday. Dr. Hallgren is going to talk about what kind of health considerations do we as small businesses need to take into account for reopening. You can find the registration at the Chamber website, at the Nebraska Enterprise website, and the Entrepreneur Education Collaborative website. So that's the best place to find those. And Leo, maybe you can pop those in the chat box if you have a second. That's going to be a great session, and that's at 11:30 on Wednesday over the noontime. And then BC will be back here on Monday with Do Space doing the Power of Purpose, which will be supporting, helping people think and helping all of us think, what do we want to accomplish? Having a clear vision can sometimes be as important as having the planning, because we need to make sure we know what we want, where we're going. And then in a week from now, we will be back at Do Space, or 2 weeks from now, I guess. Leo will be doing this for Spanish speakers. So if you know anybody that would prefer to receive this in Spanish, it'll be available in 2 weeks there. So if there's any other questions, we'd be happy to take those. Otherwise, I do want to shout out special thanks to Leon Millibar with the SBA here in Omaha and his team. I know we've asked them several questions and they've gotten back to us very, very quickly. I also know that Leon and his team have been out in the public speaking to multiple people multiple times a day. So really appreciate all that work on the SBA's part. And I know that Diva Mejias is online, and she is the president at the Hispanic Chamber of Commerce, and a great community resource. I know there's several others of you on the chat that are doing great things, like Derek and Jonathan and so forth. So we appreciate you coming here. Let us know if there's anything we can do to support you and to help your businesses become more successful.
Absolutely.
And I will give us another 30 seconds. Feel free to jump in. You have both Leo and BC's information. If you have trouble with them, let me know, but you won't have trouble with them. That's why I send them to you. Send them your way, BC and Leo, because if they go my way, they'll have trouble.
Well, it was great to get that information out, and we will post those. I think, Jim, the best way is probably post the checklist on our Facebook, probably.
Yep, I
We'll
think
probably
Leo and BC will post that on Facebook and probably on our website as well.
We have a whole list, so we'll just make it available so people can look at it and check it out.
All right. Well, we just appreciate everybody as a small business owner. It's not an easy time right now, and we know that everybody's going through a lot of challenge. So we appreciate all that you're doing to keep going, and we encourage you on that journey. Hopefully, all of us will have a little clearer picture as time moves forward. It's been the last 6 weeks have been pretty chaotic, so hopefully we'll start to get at least an idea of what normal is soon.
I think that the one thing I want to say, just stay calm. You know, this will pass, but I think staying calm and keeping a level head as leaders, as business owners, as those individuals, and, you know, keeping your spirit free, I think it's really important to just keep your head clear and stay calm. I think that things will work out the way they're supposed to. And if you need help, ask. I think that sometimes we just kind of get into our own little space, but it's really important to know that everybody wants to help everybody. And so there is help out there if you need it.
Super.
So have a great week.
Well, thanks, BC. Thanks for everybody for joining us today. And thanks to Do Space. Huge shout out for all your help. Really appreciate being able to collaborate with you. So have a great one.